Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And in this video, we're taking a look at Go Collect's hottest Silver Age comics for the month of September 20. Now, for those who don't know, Go Collect puts out a monthly article that analyzes the top 5 Silver Age comic books that have had a sudden increase in volume of sales. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the 5 books together and see what's moving. But before we get into the video, if you guys could drop me a like or comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, helps support the channel, doing those things, I would appreciate it. But let's get into this video here today. Now, of course, I will put a link in the description for this one. This article is actually written by Ryan Kirksey. Coming in at the number 5 spot, it's a book that I'm sure that you guys are all very familiar with. This one is X-Men number 12, up 48 spots. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, you guys know this is the book that came out in 1965, written by Stan Lee. That would be the first appearance of the X-Men villain known as the Juggernaut. Now, of course, the Juggernaut, also brother of Charles Xavier. This would also be known as the origin of Professor X, as you can see it right there on the cover of the comic book. And this is just a great classic key that a lot of collectors like to have in their collection. Really interesting with this book because I feel like for a lot of people, this is one that has been kind of on a steep decline, at least in these last few months or so. I've definitely noticed that of all, Silver Age keys out there, X-Men number 12 has definitely been hit very hard in comparison to a lot of the other books. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that, the Juggernaut has been a character that has been utilized many times in the Fox franchise films. Of course, we saw him in X-Men number 3, the Brett Ratner film. We've also seen him in Deadpool number 2. So I think that it has a lot of collectors apprehensive to put a lot of their money into this book. But, from the video I made just the other day where I'm talking about, fear in the market, this seems like a great opportunity to jump back into this key because the Juggernaut, I think you got to say that he's a top 5 X-Men villain. We know that we're going to be getting X-Men at some point in the future. Maybe it's going to take, 3, 4, 5 years for us to get to those X-Men stories, but this is always going to be a classic book that collectors like to have. And being that the prices have corrected so much for this one, it definitely feels like this is a great buying opportunity for it. And perhaps a lot of collectors agree because now that we're talking about it on this Silver Age list, it's definitely seen an increase in volume of sales. And I think that has to do with the fact that, the floor levels for this thing are where people are starting to feel comfortable once again. And you also have to wonder, we saw Juggernaut in Deadpool number 2. Do you think that they would bring Juggernaut back into the fold in Deadpool number 3? I can even see, them wanting to do some kind of team up. Like maybe there could be some comedic scenes with Deadpool actually allying with the Juggernaut and Colossus in Deadpool number 3. So you never really know with this type of thing. And as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. 9.8s actually have 2 on the census, but $43,000 was the last sale back in 2019. Let's go down here to kind of a 30-day moving average. 9.0s have 91 on the census. Fair market value is around $5,250. 30-day moving kind of right in line to that, but also a book that has had a little bit of a pullback from the height of 2021. You can see the graph right there is definitely seeing this book starting to trend down. It's hard to say if a book at that particular grade, like that high of a grade, would actually correct even further, but there's always, of course, the possibility. Let's focus in here on the 6.0s. The 6.0s, I think, is where the story gets a little bit more interesting. Obviously, this book shot up like a lot of other books in 2021, $2,300. Now kind of where it sits is sort of back in the trend line to, what I've been discussing in the Silver Age Index at 1740. So kind of feeling like maybe a lot of collectors are seeing these prices and thinking, okay, this feels like an okay buy-in. And then, of course, down at the bottom, you could find 1.0s and things like that slabbed at the low grade. But generally speaking, when you're buying low grade copies of this thing, you're going to be hard pressed to find them for less than $400 or so. All right, let's go on now to the 4th hottest Silver Age comic of the month. And the 4th hottest Silver Age comic of the month is a very interesting one to talk about. One that I don't think I've ever talked about on this Go Collect list or these Go Collect series of videos before. But this one is Amazing Spider-Man number 23, up 54 spots. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the book that came out in 1965, written by Stan Lee and drawn by Steve Ditko, and would feature the 3rd appearance of the Green Goblin. Now, as Ryan points out in the article, he actually mentions that the dubious distinction for this particular book is that it is actually the first Spider-Man book that is not necessarily a key book or doesn't necessarily have a first appearance like all the books previous to this. But, it is still an early ASM book, and that's still going to make it desirable out there in the market. The cover art is fantastic with this. I suppose if you do like 3rd appearances, this is a great 3rd appearance of the Green Goblin. And it's one of those things that I think is interesting where I feel like the comic book market, and we're going to get into this with a lot of the books here on this list, but the comic book market is starting to look for those opportunities for other books that maybe were were overlooked in the comic book boom of 2021. And I think a lot of people are starting to see value in some of these other keys, especially at the high grades. I mean, when you can find this book, above a 9.0 for less than $1,000, I mean, that's a very attractive proposition for a lot of people out there. And I think that's one of the reasons why people are buying these books, or this is one of the hottest books in this particular month, is that people just feel like this is good value, especially being an early ASM key. And that's why it's the fourth hottest Silver Age comic of the month. But as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. There is one 9.8 on the census. Fair market value suggested to be 52,000, but this hasn't been a sale, for over a year. Also, this is one of those books where I would be a little bit weary of, the census count for this thing, because the fact that it is ASM 23, not a specific key that a lot of people are going after. There's no reason to suggest that there aren't a bunch of raw copies out there that are like 9.8 contenders. But if we go down here to the 9.0, 73 on the census, $1,200 fair market value, 30-day moving is $1,248. Hard to chart this sort of thing because there's so few sales to actually pull data from, but you can see the last couple sales, $1,200, $1,200, $1,700. So, I mean, for a 9.0 Silver Age book at $1,200, it's really not too bad overall. 7.0s, fair market value $625, but the 30-day moving is around the $500 range. And then down here at the bottom, not a book that you're going to typically see slabbed at the low grade, but when you go onto eBay looking for raw copies of this thing, you can find it being sold around that $125 to $150 range. All right, let's move on now to the third hottest Silver Age comic of the month. And the third hottest Silver Age comic of the month is a very cool book, one that I feel like is maybe underappreciated, but also maybe not underappreciated, starting to get a lot of appreciation in the market. I see a lot of people talking about this book, but this one actually is Avengers number 11, up 57 spots. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the book that came out in 1964, written by Stan Lee and drawn by Jack Kirby, that would feature the second appearance of Kang the Conqueror, but also would be the first time that Spider-Man meets the Avengers. Now, second appearance of Kang the Conqueror, definitely a cool factor to this book. I think second appearances are very cool for certain collectors out there in the market. I tend to like them, but also the first meeting factor is definitely an attractive key element to this book right here. I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about first meetings and things like that, but I do feel like there's a large section of comic book collectors that do have an appreciation for these types of things, and this is a very cool moment. I mean, Spider-Man meeting the Avengers is a very cool thing, and this is the first time that you would see Spider-Man in this particular Avengers run. So that is a very, very cool aspect to this book. It's also one of the earliest times that Jack Kirby drew Spider-Man. A lot of the Silver Age Spider-Man appearances were often drawn by Steve Ditko. Not too many times that you actually see Jack Kirby drawing Spider-Man. So that's kind of a cool element to this book as well. And I think a lot of collectors are starting to weigh all the pros of this book and really starting to have an appreciation for it, because this is one that was not hot, in 2021, the early on in 2021. And it took a while for this one to actually shoot up in the numbers, but a lot of people are now really jumping onto this thing. And that's one of the reasons why it is the third hottest Silver Age comic of the month. And as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. 9.8s have 3 on the census, hasn't been a sale since 2018, so hard to say what that would sell for today. 9.6s though have 27 on the census. Fair market value is $9,250. There actually was a sale, a couple months ago that went for $9,600. Previous to that, there was a sale for $6,600. So definitely a book that has been, massively trending up, especially at auction. I mean, that's a very impressive sale going on August 19th on Golden Auctions for $9,600 for this book. A very, very strong sale for this particular key. And then if we go down here, check out some of the other grades. 7.0s, 116 on the census, $650 for fair market value. 30-day moving, kind of right in line to that $700. I mean, definitely starting to trend up overall. I mean, there, of course, is going to be massive sales that happened on, the 2021 boom and things like that. But generally speaking, this book is trending up overall in the market. And then down here at the bottom, probably not going to find too many slabs at the 2.0 range. But typically speaking, when you go onto eBay looking for raw copies of this thing, I see them now being sold around that $150 to $225 level, depending on the deal and depending on the grade you can find for yourself. All right, let's go on now to the second hottest Silver Age comic of the month. And the second hottest Silver Age comic of the month is another Amazing Spider-Man key. But this one, of course, is Amazing Spider-Man number 8, up 61 spots. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is a book that came out in 1964, written by Stan Lee and drawn by Steve Ditko. That would be the 8th book in the Amazing Spider-Man run. Now, this book also does feature the first appearance of a character known as the Living Brain, not necessarily one of the A-tier characters in the annals of Marvel comic history, but a first appearance nonetheless. It is also the first battle of Spider-Man and the Human Torch. Of course, not a tremendously popular thing that collectors want to have, but it is an early ASM book and something that is special. A lot of people like those ASM runs, so it's one of those books that, at some point you're going to have to get your hands on this thing if you want to complete your ASM run. But I would say that this is probably the less appreciated early ASM book, especially when we're thinking about the top 10 ASM keys, or at least the ones that started this particular comic book run. Definitely one that I feel like a lot of people forget about in general, but it is interesting to see it on the list this week. I feel like a lot of people are just looking for those opportunities to pick up these, ASM books, ASM keys out there in the market. They're seeing where the prices are correcting to. They already view this book as being, very, very affordable and undervalued. And that's one of the reasons why it's showing up on the list this week. And as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. 9.8s actually have 6 on the census. There was a sale that went for $21,000 a year ago, but let's take a look at some recent stuff. 9.2s have 43 on the census. Fair market value is $5,000. 30-day moving is $4,000. So, still a very pricey book for not necessarily having that key distinction, but, people are ASM super fans. And if you want a 9.2 high grade version of this book, you're still going to have to put up some money because it's obviously going to be hard to find these things at the high grade. I mean, you can see at the 9.2, it's the top 5% for this book, and those whales got to complete their ASM runs. 7.0s 30-day moving is around the $1,300 range. 4.0s around $562. And then of course, down here at the bottom, low grades, you might see them slab from time to time, but generally speaking, when you go onto eBay looking for raw copies of this thing, it's still going to set you back around that $250 to $350 range. All right, let's move on now to the hottest Silver Age comic of the month. And the hottest Silver Age comic of the month is a very cool one to talk about, but this one is actually Amazing Spider-Man number 20, up 79 spots. Another Spider-Man key on the list, but what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the book that came out in 1965, written by Stan Lee and drawn by Steve Ditko, that would feature the first appearance of the character known as the Scorpion. Now, Matt Gargan actually makes his first appearance in ASM 19, but in issue 20, he would take up the villainous persona known as the Scorpion. And this is an interesting character, one that I feel like is, the step below ASM's top rogue gallery of villains. I feel like Spider-Man has such an incredible rogue gallery of villains that, the Scorpion has been sort of left behind, even though he has the potential to be a very, very top tier villain out there in the market. I mean, when you think about a lot of other characters out there that are kind of lacking a bunch of villain characters to bounce off of. I mean, imagine if the Scorpion actually made his debut in the Daredevil comic book run. I feel like the Scorpion could be a much higher tier of villain character if he wasn't always playing second fiddle to all of Spider-Man's great villains. But, he still is a very cool villain, and one that a lot of collectors have been excited about because of the fact that, in the very first Spider-Man movie in the MCU, they set up the idea of this character making his return in some kind of way. But I think a lot of collectors are confused with what might be happening in the future with everything going on with Michael Keaton Vulture meeting Scorpion in prison. Is he going to make his way onto the screen? Is he not? Sort of hard to tell with this particular key book out there, but that doesn't stop collectors from wanting to jump in on this book. A villain with a lot of potential, a very, very cool cover in my opinion, and the hottest Silver Age comic of the month. As we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. 9.8s have 7 on the census. Fair market value suggests $54,000. Would be hard to know what that would actually sell for. 9.4s have 31 on the census. There was a sale a year ago for $8,422. So definitely a pretty strong sale overall. 8.5s, fair market value suggests $3,600, although the 30-day moving is actually a little bit down at the $3,000 range. And maybe that is one of the reasons why this is one of the hottest selling comic books this month, because of the fact that the prices are sort of coming back down to earth. 6.0s, fair market value $1,250, 30-day moving is $1,300. And then down here at the bottom, Go Collect has a few listed here at the low grade, but typically speaking, when you go into eBay looking for raw copies at the low grade, you're still going to have to spend around that $400 to $450 level. It is still a great key villain first appearance, still a great key ASM book, and one that a lot of collectors like to have. Anyways, that's all I have for this video. Those were Go Collect's hottest Silver Age comics for the month of September. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys have any of these books? Have you guys been hunting any of these books? Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and we'll see you in the next video.